unpack that. Skadoodle was one of the last major names that had really garnered attention in the closed beta in Valorant, and there was a lot of conversation there about where will Skadoodle go, and he ends up going to the team that has basically, you could say, invested the most in Valorant so far. They were the earliest adopters, and they've brought on quite a few big names onto their roster, and a little bit of a reunion as well with Skadoodle coming there. Jacob, when you first heard this news, was it surprising to you, or perhaps with the teammates already there, was this a foregone conclusion in your opinion?
Well, if you remember us talking on Monday, I said that this was who I thought would be. I said from a skill perspective, this is the best fit for them of available players. I thought that Hiko would have been a better fit from a shot calling perspective because he's much more of a voice. If you're unfamiliar with Skadoodle, as someone who's spent a lot of time around him, Skadoodle's incredibly smart. That's why he's been such a good Counter-Strike player. His game IQ is off the charts. What he's not so great at is communication. He's a very quiet, sort of shy guy. Not rude or anything. I don't want to make it seem like he's a jerk. He's a really nice dude when you have a conversation with him, but he's not like Hiko, who's very much loud and sort of aggressive in calls. And I kind of thought that's what T1 needed, was a shot caller, versus, somebody else who kind of, doesn't contribute in the same way. He does speak, but he's not loud and aggressive. He kind of just does his thing and focuses, which is fine. I think Skadoodle's an incredibly talented player, and to your point, this is a little bit of the IBUYPOWER reunion, and a lot of people get frustrated because they've heard the IBUYPOWER story over and over again. So we're not gonna have to dive into what happened there, but essentially those guys prior to being banned by Valve were on a hot streak together. AZK, Brax, and Skadoodle. They were, it's the only reason Skadoodle didn't get banned is because he didn't accept the skins. In all of that. That's why he was able to go on to play for C9 and win a world championship in Counter-Strike, and have such incredible performances on that Cloud9 team. But I think the big thing now is this team clearly gels very well together. I'm interested to sort of see how Food and Crashies sort of fit in with the 3/5 of the former IBUYPOWER team from a personality perspective. I would expect or they probably wouldn't be on this team, and I would bet that Brax has had a lot of input since being there for, he was there months even before they signed AZK as well. So nonetheless, I think this team has the potential to be one of the best Valorant teams in the early pro scene, if they're not already on that trajectory. And I like taking this approach, all former CS guys, versus the Sentinels approach of random sort of hodgepodge with various different games, Apex, Overwatch, Counter-Strike, etc. So I like this approach better, and I think that the history between Skadoodle, AZK, and Brax kind of speaks for itself. They all got along. There was not a really bad falling out at the end of IBUYPOWER. It just what happened. So, but I think they will gel pretty well immediately. And we've already seen them playing in tournaments together, ours included, and as an unofficial team. So I think they'll do pretty well.
Tyler, do you like this IBUYPOWER mini reunion here happening at T1 in Valorant?
Yeah, I think it's a really cool story. I talked to Brax a few days ago, working on a feature with him, and we talked about, the incident and him having to watch Skadoodle go to Cloud9, right? And in his mind, it ate at him because he knew he was still playing Counter-Strike at the time, and he was beating these players. He was beating these players who would go on to become world champions, and he had to sit there, not allowed to play pro, watching one of his friends become a world champion without him. And he had nothing, he could do nothing. It wasn't that he didn't fail on the pro stage, he got banned. And he was he was defeated by Valve and himself, not any players. So that's what really hurt him. Now, 5 years later, it's kind of the ultimate run back. Obviously, Daze and Steel would have made it the true ultimate run back, but you have a majority of the IBUYPOWER team, Ska, AZK, and Brax, and then two of these, rising rookies or rising young talents in, the tier 2 CS scene in NA with Food and Crashies. And it's a really interesting mix, and just think of if this team goes to the World Championship, it's going to be a really big moment. I'm sure people from Counter-Strike, even if people from Counter-Strike don't like Valorant, and I understand those point of views if they just don't like watching it, But you know for a fact if this team makes it to a final of a world championship or makes a deep run, people are going to be tuning in to see this story come to a conclusion because this is one of the biggest stories in esports history. We can't overlook it. These guys, the Richard Lewis article and everything that went around it was gigantic. Even even back then when I was a casual CS:GO viewer, it took over. Even as a League of Legends reporter back then, it took over the entire scene. It was gigantic. So this is a huge kind of. Who would have thought 5 years ago that these three players would be playing on a Riot FPS game on SKT T1? It's a ridiculous thought 5 years ago, but here we are, and it's gonna be very fun to watch them.